Ben Shapiro built a career opposing identity politics as a proud Zionist.
Or how about the only question that matters is whether or not something is true?
Yeah.
And another way to put it, a phrase that I've coined and made copyright is facts don't care about your feelings.
If Douglas Murray has no interest in actually addressing the substance of the arguments that Dave Smith is making, or anyone who's being critical of the current Israeli government, the points they're making, then maybe he should just shut up.
The IDF is a moral army. We would never bomb a hospital. Every hospital in Gaza is obliterated. And now they are actively saying out loud in public and in internal debates about how they would like to murder Palestinian children.
As someone who's always liked Douglas and known him for a while, my first instinct was, wow, he just destroyed his career. Like, he's done.
I don't think Douglas Murray destroyed his career. I think he destroyed his reputation.
Sam Harris is a meditation app. I didn't even know that. So by day, he's a meditation guru, and by night, he's encouraging like carpet bombing of children. I mean, I spent my whole life in cable news. It, obviously is in terminal decline. I had all kinds of views that I argued for passionately. They were totally wrong. I admitted it. I gained perspective and humility in admitting it.
Ben Shapiro built a career opposing identity politics as a proud Zionist.
Libertarian comedian Dave Smith sat down with Tucker Carlson for a very lengthy dunk session on all our favorite characters in the right wing or pro-Israel universe, and I love to see it. This was one of the more fascinating conversations that Tucker Carlson has had on his podcast, and it was wide-ranging in regard to who they decided to dunk on. So before we get to the details, Cenk, thoughts?
Yeah, so look, everybody comes in with preconceived notions. Please stop, right? The political spectrum is jumbled now. And so you find allies where you find wherever you can find them. And so in this case, yes, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson are allies in stopping the war with Iran. If you say no, I would rather remain pure. And so I feel great about myself, but our chances of stopping the war are reduced because we didn't work together. But I feel morally pure. Then you're being selfish, right? And so we're not selfish here. So we're willing to say, yeah, Tucker Carlson's doing a good job on this, not on other things, on this. Dave Smith, by the way, for a guy that intelligent, I can't believe some of his other opinions, okay? But on this, he's gold.
He is, he's really good on this issue.
He's the best in the business on this.
I totally agree.
Right?
And he triggers right-wing Israel supporters like you wouldn't believe. He triggers them like crazy, and he's gonna explain why in some of the snippets I show you.
Yeah, look, I have the quickest explanation. Dave Smith drives them crazy because he's Jewish, okay? And so it takes away their main weapon. You can't call him an anti-Semite. But anyways, you're gonna see that in some of the things that are coming up here. It's an amazing interview, all right.
So let's start with the exchange on the topic of Douglas Murray.
As someone who's always liked Douglas and known him for a while, my first instinct was, wow, he just destroyed his career. Like, he's done. No smart person will ever take Douglas seriously again. And I don't know if he felt that way, but it was clear by a day or two after he realized he destroyed his career. And in response, rather than admitting that and admitting what he'd done wrong, he attacked you, really kind of doubled down in the New York Post. I want to read this. The whole column's an attack on you, and I'm quoting, claiming some Jewish ancestry, Smith has spent the last 18 months since October 7th being very unfunny. Indeed. Claiming some Jewish ancestry. Now, I'm not really sure. Well, I'm just gonna, I don't know why that just,
Well,
so what, do you claim some Jewish ancestry?
My mom and dad are probably the big ones.
I mean,
yeah, and I don't know what Douglas Murray is, but I know that he, is obviously on the side of Israel, and so there are two tricks that they always go to the well on is the minute you criticize Israel, 0.5%. Anti-Semite, right? And you know it. And so when they can't use it on Dave Smith or Glenn Greenwald or Bernie Sanders or et cetera, they get super frustrated.
Exactly.
You're taking away our one-trick pony. No, pony, come back, right? And so it goes on and on. And guys, also, that's why it's a great, and they're gonna get into Steve Witkoff, right? And who they're most mad at now, he's also Jewish, also drives them nuts. And in fact, they're gonna get into the core of that in a second. But that also goes to show you, it is not a Jewish thing, okay? So don't go down that dark path of, oh, the Jews, this, that, and the other thing. No, Jewish Americans are our best fighters for peace, right?
Yeah.
So thank God for them. So there's a difference between somebody who's just Jewish and someone who's Israel first. There's a difference between me, who is Turkish and proud, right? That's my ethnicity originally. But I love America and I'm an American citizen and I am America way before Turkey, like a billion miles before Turkey, because I'm an American, right? And that's how Dave Smith is, and that's how Steve Witkoff is. And I love that. But there are people who would be, in the category of no, my homeland in their mind before America. Well then, brother, I mean, you're in the wrong place. Then go to that place.
If Douglas Murray has no interest in actually addressing the substance of the arguments that Dave Smith is making, or anyone who's being critical of the current Israeli government, the points they're making, then maybe he should just shut up. Okay, I'm not interested in hearing him like lob out all sorts of ridiculous, false allegations of anti-Semitism or lack of expertise. Either address the substance of the arguments that Dave Smith is making or shut up. But that's the thing, he totally thought he could just use the same tricks that have been used for decades against anyone who raises concern over the conduct of the Israeli government and the IDF. And so he didn't get away with it this time because Dave Smith, yes, he's Jewish, but more importantly, he's well read. He knows what he's talking about, and he's making substantive arguments that Murray has no real response to. Now, why is Murray so gung-ho in defending Israel at all costs, regardless of what the IDF is doing, regardless of how many children die in Gaza? Well, look, I don't know if I necessarily agree with this, but I think that the theory that you're about to hear from Dave Smith is interesting. Take a look.
She started bringing Liz Cheney out to campaign events and campaigning with Liz Cheney. Now, if you were just looking at this on paper, you'd go, okay, what demographic of voters is this for? And you'd very quickly realize that that demographic doesn't exist.
No.
Are the leftists, they still remember her last name is Cheney. And then on the other side, I mean, she lost by like 50 points in her congressional run. I mean, it's not like you're bringing Republicans in. And so I think the only thing you could conclude is that, oh, this isn't actually for the voters. There's somebody else who Kamala Harris is talking to here.
Of course.
There's a power source that may be a little concerned about her, and she's trying to let them know, don't worry, I'm good for business. I've got Liz Cheney right here. That's kind of my assumption. It seemed to me with the Douglas Murray thing, he wasn't playing to the audience. He certainly wasn't trying to persuade Joe.
No.
He perhaps was talking to a different audience,
Clearly.
which will make sure that his career is just fine going forward.
Essentially saying that Douglas Murray is a shill, a paid shill.
If he had said that in the past and he wasn't Jewish, it wouldn't be just Douglas Murray's of the world. It would be all of mainstream media who would say, anti-Semite. But wait, is he getting paid or isn't he? That's a good question, right? Are politicians getting paid by AIPAC or no, that's not a good question, that's clear. They are definitely getting paid by AIPAC. Isn't it amazing that great reporters, they got their hat and they got the pencil on behind their ear and guys, I'm a national media reporter. And you couldn't figure out that AIPAC's the largest donor to politicians in this cycle and that politicians might care about the campaign contributions? Like that, you just couldn't piece that one together.
Here, let me help him out.
Come on.
Let me help him out. AIPAC's Political Action Committee and its super PAC, which is known as the United Democracy Project, that's cute, spent nearly $126.9 million combined during the 2023 and 2024 election cycle. And that's according to filings with the FEC. That includes more than $55.2 million in donations given to federal candidates. Let's take a gander over at the Democratic side where, oh wow, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries has received close to $1 million from AIPAC.
And today he was loudly complaining about the plane from Qatar, and that's normal, that's fine. And then he had to add in Qatar, which is allied with Iran and Hamas. Leaving out the fact that U.S. Central Command has a base in Qatar. They're an actual ally, not because we invented a thing called special ally, where that special ally takes $300 billion from us, make us fight their wars, and it gives nothing back to us. Qatar actually gives us things back. So, but Hakeem Jeffries, no. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's probably a coincidence that he got $1 million from the Israeli lobby, and then is constantly telling everybody how great Israel is and how all their enemies are super evil and that we have to kill all of them and give all of our money to Israel. And oh, look at that, the Republicans do the same thing. Ted Cruz, same thing today, right? So, but the second trick that they developed over the years now was this expertise one that Anna mentioned, right? And so this one's personal for me because I debated Douglas Murray on Piers Morgan now like nearly a year ago, right? And what did he do? He said, oh, you've never been there. You can go back and watch it. Okay, it's online.
Yeah, look, for someone who's been there, he's really having a tough time responding to the substantive arguments that Dave Smith is making. So if being there on an Israeli government-led junket, okay, gives you more expertise, then you should be, equipped with the arguments necessary to totally dismantle Dave Smith. Instead, he failed to do that and resorted to ridiculous ad hominem attacks. And
so in the debate that I had with him, he had no facts, nothing. Everything was always like, oh, it's Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. I don't trust Hamas's numbers. And you wouldn't know because you haven't been there. And you know what, back then though, before he was exposed by Rogan and the others and Dave Smith, you look at the comment section and it's amazing how people fall for propaganda. So there's tons of people, I don't know if they're Israeli bots or real people who are like, oh, being there is the only thing that matters. If you've never actually gone to Gaza where Israel, by the way, would murder you, it doesn't count, it doesn't count, it doesn't count. And he's a real expert, but understand the core of that trick. They claim that only the pro-Israeli people are experts and that people who criticize Israel, they're all no good amateurs and not experts. So you should never have them on. You should only have the pro-Israeli people on. But Douglas, are you an actual expert? He's an English major. He has no expertise at all. He went and spent 18 months with his boyfriend in Israel. And every once in a while, the IDF would take him on a press junket. That's not expertise. That's actually worse. That means you're in the tank for them. They hired you to do propaganda for them.
That's exactly right. And by the way, I mean, look, we asked the question about Douglas Murray's identity. Is he Jewish himself?
I don't care at all.
It doesn't matter, it really doesn't. But for those who are curious, he did grow up Christian, but he now identifies as an atheist. There's like a weird collection of self-described atheists who seem to really hate Muslims and also have this weird attachment to Israel.
No, it's not just, and I had a 3-hour debate with Sam Harris about this, right? And you could go back and check that out on YouTube. And I'm atheist. I don't mind that they're atheists at all. But they're a specific kind of atheist where they say, now of course all of religion is nonsense, there's no invisible God, it's absurd, none of it's true at all, but the Muslims are worse. The Muslims are the worst of all the religions. Wait, if none of it is true, and that's, again, you'll see it in the debate that I had with him or the discussion I had with him, I'm like, they all have if you're a real atheist, you think they all have a 0% chance of being true. Not, hey, I got a problem with some of the religions, but Islam is really the problem. No, that's just you being a weirdo Israel supporter having nothing to do with atheism, right? So Sam Harris, Douglas Murray, Bill Maher, all pretend to be very principled atheists. And by definition, you're not principled if you say one of the religions is worse. And so it's a preposterous claim, but look at that, golly gee, they all happen to be enormous supporters of Israel. And of course, they all claim expertise, and anyone who doesn't support Israel has no expertise. It doesn't matter. So these are super tired propaganda tricks. So they're being exposed to everyone now. And guys, the reason why this interview is even more important is a lot of us on the left already know this. But for the right wing, and for those who were saying a year ago when I debated Douglas Murray, he's been there. Now they're all making fun of Douglas Murray. Now they're all making fun of Sam Harris. And the right wing used to support those guys, right? Now the right wing has exposed them. Now we're getting convergence against the establishment. And in this case, the establishment is pro-Israel and wants to ban us, wants to make sure that we're never allowed to talk, but that monopoly has been broken now. And so now people are all saying it at once. And so when does it get to the politicians? And look, it's on all of us. If a politician is taking AIPAC money, as a general rule, you should vote against them. That's not that complicated because they don't work for this government. They work for another government. And you apply that to Turkey, you apply that to Russia, you apply that to any government you like. If they have American Russians for Russia, no, you don't take money from them, okay? It's not that complicated. So anyway, great job by Dave Smith. And it's a beautiful new day in America and we're allowed to say things that are true and not get universally canceled for it.
Now look, there's this rift within the right wing of this country. And that rift really has to do with the old school neoconservative Republican flavor, right? The Bush era Republican types who probably hold their noses and say supportive things about Trump, even though they absolutely despise him. And then there's the anti-neocon, anti-war, version of the Republican Party, or it's within the Republican base. And I think it's best represented by some of the comments that you're gonna hear from Dave Smith, who does call himself a right winger, and Tucker Carlson. So at the center of this conflict within the Republican Party is the notion that the United States should go to war with Iran on behalf of Israel. And I'm very happy to see that there is a sizable portion of the Republican electorate that does not want to do that. They're speaking out against it. And there are some figures within the Trump administration who clearly hold that same position and have had some sway over Trump in avoiding a war with Iran. And I'm very happy to hear that. Now, we covered a little bit of what Dave and Tucker had to say about Douglas Murray. That happened yesterday. We don't need to go back to that. But it's also clear that they're not fans of Sam Harris either.
This is from a guy called Sam Harris?
I'm loosely familiar.
Sam Harris, wow, he doesn't care for you at all, or it looks like me either, but whatever, I'll ignore the stuff about me. I'm not even exactly sure who Sam Harris is, but a sad atheist guy. Sam Harris is a meditation app. I didn't even know that. So by day, he's a meditation guru, and by night, he's encouraging like carpet bombing of children.
I mean, when he's right, and Tucker Carlson was right. I mean, Sam Harris, after that disastrous Douglas Murray debacle on Rogan, decided, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna defend my buddy, Douglas Murray. Mostly because I agree with Douglas Murray in going after anyone who's critical of the Israeli government, because of course Israel has to absolutely destroy the Gaza Strip, indiscriminately kill Palestinian civilians, bomb every hospital, bomb every refugee camp, steal more land in the West Bank. I mean, they're Muslims, am I right? They're super dangerous. That's Sam Harris for you. So like, spare me your meditation app. It should be the case that any public figure who openly and brazenly cheerleads the slaughter of innocent people should just be like banned from public life. Shouldn't be someone who's supported through a business or a show or whatever. I mean, put it in any other context. I remember when there were a few disgusting individuals online celebrating what happened to innocent Israeli civilians on October 7th. Those people were rightly called out. But then you turn around and you look at the conduct of the Israeli government and the IDF, Sam Harris openly cheerleading it. And for once, people like Harris are getting called out by the likes of Tucker Carlson, which I never thought I'd see. So I will allow it, I enjoy it. Not the bombing, not the killing, but the fact that finally, for the first time in my adult life, I'm witnessing people on the right who are like, this seems this seems immoral, doesn't it? All right, so that's Sam Harris under the bus. Let's move on. So Tucker Carlson apparently also had a falling out with a neoconservative who I have loathed since I was in high school. His name's Bill Kristol. I remember being in high school English class. We were reading The Glass Menagerie. I don't know why I remember that so vividly. It was like one of the situations where all the students read The Glass Menagerie, or read out loud, like sections of that play. I thought it was boring, so I was reading the New York Times, and at that moment I was reading a quote from Bill Kristol urging the US to engage in a preemptive war in Iraq. And it made me really angry. So I was delighted to hear what Tucker Carlson had to say about Bill Kristol on his podcast. Let's watch.
I remember Bill Kristol, who I worked for years and really liked and was grateful to, and he was a great boss in the 90s, and came out against me and called me a Nazi and all this stuff, like without calling me. One of the criticisms against me, I'll never forget it when I realized this phenomenon was real, was when he accused me of advocating, and I'm quoting, for an ethno-state. Now, I have a lot of flaws. They're all on display. I've never wanted an ethno-state. And it's like, wait, one of us is for an ethno-state, and it's not me.
True. Ethno-state bad. Except for that one ethno-state in the Middle East. Yeah. Finally, Ben Shapiro and allegations of his feelings overcoming facts came up during this exchange between Dave Smith and Tucker Carlson. Take a look.
Ben Shapiro built a career opposing identity politics as a proud Zionist.
Or how about the only question that matters is whether or not something is true?
Yeah.
And another way to put it, a phrase that I've coined and made copyright is facts don't care about your feelings.
That's a good one.
You like that?
Someone should really run with that.
I like that.
That's a good.
You could get a long way. You could get like a special deal with Facebook on the basis of that. But I actually agree. I agree with that.
If you accuse Ben Shapiro of having dual loyalty, they go, "Oh, that's an anti-Semitic trope. That means you hate the Jews." But then he'll sit there in his own words and say, I forget his exact quote, but it was something like, "My favorite thing about the United States of America is that it protects Israel." And so you're already saying you have loyalty to both of these countries. In fact, I'm not so sure about one of the loyalties, but I'm very sure about the other one. And that is not, I'm sorry, that's not a statement against Jewish people.
He's right. That's not a statement against Jewish people. And if Ben Shapiro values Israel so much, why is he living here? Why isn't he living in Israel? That's the thing I don't understand, right? To live in the United States, to enjoy what this country has to offer, to become tremendously successful in this country, by the way, and then turn around and advocate for American citizens to essentially have their hard-earned money taken from them by the federal government, not to provide a better healthcare system, not to provide a more robust social safety net when the economy falters, but specifically to supply a foreign country with bombs so they can continue their project of stealing land in the Middle East. That's what it is, guys. That's what it is. That is what it is. I know that this is hard to hear for some folks, especially because we've been living in a country where this type of backlash was unheard of. People were terrified to speak out. But it's a brand new era. I mean, we've opened Pandora's box at this point, and people feel like it's more important to speak out than to avoid a fake allegation of anti-Semitism.
If Mark Levin is calling the Trump administration anti-Semitic, Steve Witkoff, we're at the end of something and the beginning of something new.
All these years later, you either have to like apologize for your role in this catastrophe or defend your role in this catastrophe and talk about how you still really believe it was the right thing to do. But you can't sit here and say you're not an expert and you're a Jew hater if you say the word neoconservative.
If you're calling Steve Witkoff an anti-Semite on Twitter, like, you know you're losing, right?
That loser Tucker Carlson is referring to is conservative talk show host Mark Levin, a well-known neoconservative lunatic whose foreign policy preferences have fallen out of vogue among Republican voters in recent years, for good reason. And while I find their rejection of the warmongers who dragged our young American soldiers into multiple Middle East deployments commendable, Levin certainly doesn't agree with me. After all, the loudmouth hog was, and still is, a neocon, a disgusting, bloviating one at that. Levin has never been shy about cheerleading for US military intervention in the Middle East on behalf of Israel. In fact, he's demanding we go to war with Iran on behalf of Israel right now. So it should come as no surprise that Levin didn't appreciate that Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff cited neoconservatives in a critical fashion while expressing his interest in diplomatic solutions to foreign conflicts.
The neocon element believes that war is the only way to solve things. And the president believes that his force of personality, the way he is going to respond to situations, can bend people to do things in a much better way in the interest of the United States government, and I believe in that too.
In response to Witkoff's statement, Levin did what the right often criticizes the left for doing. He weaponized identity to shut down criticism that he doesn't like. In an X post that, of course, included the video featuring Witkoff's statements about neoconservatives, Levin declared that neocon is a pejorative for Jew and ended his comments with an unbelievable. The only thing that's unbelievable is that Levin tried to play the anti-Semitic card, plus he was wrong to do so. He's wrong in his statement. Neocon has just become a dirty word because no one likes them, which is why Levin's weaponized social media declaration was met with a community note that just simply reads, a neocon is not a pejorative for someone who is Jewish. Yeah. Now, before I go off on neocon scum that absolutely have blood on their hands, I just want to take a moment to weigh in on Steve Witkoff. The real estate developer was chosen by Trump back in November of 2024 to be his incoming administration's special envoy to the Middle East, which, to be quite honest with you guys, was concerning because Witkoff had no diplomatic experience. And with the war on Gaza raging, honestly, I expected the worst from Witkoff. But I was pleasantly surprised to learn that he began playing a key role in negotiating a ceasefire and hostage exchange between Israel and Hamas even before Trump was inaugurated for his second term. Witkoff's approach was unconventional considering that Israel was part of the equation. According to the Wall Street Journal, Witkoff sat down with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and reminded him of all the favors Trump carried out for Israel in his first term, including the recognition of Jerusalem as the Israeli capital and Israel's sovereignty over the occupied Golan Heights. Then Witkoff told the Israeli leader that the president has been a great friend of Israel, and now it's time to be a friend back. He then played hardball, telling the prime minister that he needed to allow Israel's ceasefire negotiators to make decisions, and that if Netanyahu didn't want to work that way, everyone should just pack their bags and go home. What's the point? He also was similarly tough with the Arab side of the deal. Just a day earlier in Doha, Qatar, Witkoff told them it was time for an agreement, not endless diplomatic back and forth. So immediately after the meeting, Netanyahu sent a key aide and the heads of Israel's spy agencies to Doha for an intense week of negotiations that brought a deal which had been moribund just weeks earlier back into play. Both Hamas and Israel agreed to the first round of the deal, which would bring dozens of hostages home and stop the unbearable bloodshed for 6 weeks. Witkoff even flew to Israel on January 29th and made a rare entry into Gaza to personally oversee the ceasefire. Now, during this time, there was also an increased flow of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip, which of course Israel had purposely been blocking throughout the entirety of the war. Because of that deal that Witkoff helped broker, Hamas released 33 hostages, which is 33 more than Israel was able to free through their genocidal war on Gazans. It was also nice to see a change from the Biden-Harris administration, which of course made repeated public statements about how they were pressuring Israel to end the war. In reality, they were doing no such thing. Former Israeli ambassador Michael Herzog told Israeli press that God did the state of Israel a favor that Biden was the president during this period. We fought in Gaza for over a year, and the administration never came to us and said, ceasefire now. It never did. And that's not to be taken for granted. I don't take it for granted, I'll never forget. Even Obama official Ben Rhodes excoriated the Biden administration's handling of the war.
It was a choice for the United States to unreservedly back what Israel did for that whole year. That was a choice. It wasn't something that happened because of gravity. It wasn't something that happened because politics inevitably means you support Israel unconditionally. Joe Biden made a choice to provide unconditional military support to this Israeli government and this military operation. And just mouthing words of concern about the scale of loss of life doesn't matter. You made that choice.
But look, we didn't even need Michael Herzog's admission about the Biden administration to know that there was no pressure on Israel to agree to a ceasefire. Because guess what? We have eyes, we can see. There were never any brakes on that car. Unfortunately, though, that didn't stop Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from delivering one of the most embarrassing lines of her career during the Democratic National Convention last year.
She is working tirelessly to secure a ceasefire in Gaza and bringing hostages home.
Was she really? Kamala Harris was working tirelessly to secure a ceasefire? No, she wasn't. The fact that Harris was literally traversing the campaign trail with Liz neocon Cheney in tow should have been a major red flag. AOC chose to ignore it in order to ingratiate herself with the same Democrats that she was elected to fight back against. Anyway, getting back to the fate of the ceasefire Witkoff helped secure, a real estate developer helped secure, Israel went back to intentionally starving Palestinians trapped in Gaza by March 2nd. Because guess what? Benjamin Netanyahu had no interest in moving forward with the second phase of the ceasefire deal and decided to propose a brand new plan in which Hamas would release hostages in exchange for extending the truce for another 50 days. But it wouldn't bring the war to an end. And look, Netanyahu knew Hamas wouldn't accept the altered deal, and that was the whole point. Now we know, without a shadow of a doubt, that Israel always intended to expand its military operation to ethnically cleanse Palestinians from the Gaza Strip using American bombs that we taxpayers are forced to pay for, even as we get crushed by inflation and poor economic conditions. It's disgusting. Additionally, Israel and its allies have been trying to remove Witkoff from the Trump administration, including Mark Levin, who tried to call Witkoff, a Jewish individual, by the way, an anti-Semite. Here's more screeching from the dead-eyed loser who wants to send your kids to fight Israel's war in Iran.
Is filled with terrorists and terrorist regimes. Americans do not like Iran and the regime that runs it. They're terrorists. They keep threatening to destroy us and our friends, the Israelis. I speak for Christians and Jews and others alike. This is the view of the American people. That's number one. Americans hate Hamas. We hate terrorists, butchers, Nazis. We hate men that kill babies.
I mean, Levin's right, I hate terrorists. Speaking of which, how many babies have been killed by your beloved Israeli government, Levin? Far more than Hamas has killed. Tens of thousands of children have been slaughtered by the IDF during this current round of war. Volunteer American doctors in Gaza came back home and spoke of the dozens of babies who were killed by Israeli snipers. They showed up to the hospital with freaking bullet holes in their heads, 2-year-olds. And we're just supposed to accept that and rally the troops for a brutal war with Iran? Nah. Even before Levin accused Witkoff of being an anti-Semite, Douglas Murray scoffed at Dave Smith's use of the moniker neoconservative during their debate, if you can call it that, on Joe Rogan's podcast.
If we just went in because there was this uprising in 2011 and because we were worried that Gaddafi was about to go genocidal, something that the UK Parliament did an investigation into and found out said was just completely wrong. But why is it then that I got 4-star General Wesley Clark, Supreme Commander of the NATO forces? Why is it that he told me that he saw the plans in 2001 to overthrow Gaddafi, and that this was part of a strategy to overthrow 7 governments in 5 years, and all of them except one have been done at this point? So you're telling me it's just complete coincidence that he saw that the neoconservatives had this plan to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi, and then 10 years later we happen to do it when we have the opportunity? The two aren't related at all?
First, it's nice to hear the N word again.
The N word? Did I say that?
Conservatives.
Oh, that one. I was thinking of a different one. Okay.
God, that is embarrassing. Murray amounting neoconservative to the N word is hilarious because he literally wrote a book titled Neoconservatism, Why We Need It. I'm not kidding. Here it is. You can see a photo of it. I mean, I think it was published in 2006 when neoconservatism hadn't fallen out of favor, by the way, among the Republican base. But honestly, to Republican voters' credit, they were able to accept the fact that the American people were lied to by the neoconservatives within the Bush administration, that Iraq never had weapons of mass destruction, that Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, that we were totally tricked by the neoconservatives in the George W. Bush administration to strike Iraq in a preemptive war that was a complete and utter freaking disaster. Equating neocon with the N-word was Murray's way of signaling that anyone speaking out against the horrific death, destruction, and war crimes neocons cheerlead in the Middle East should be condemned. It's Murray's way of silencing his opposition, which, much to his chagrin, he's failing at. I'm amused by it. But I assume the family members of the 4,419 American troops who died in Iraq on behalf of Israel's desires to go to war with Iraq have their own views on neoconservatives. The problem for folks like Murray and Levin is that the cat's out of the bag. We know too much. Smith clearly knows too much. Levin and Murray can't defend the indefensible, so they just start attacking those with legitimate critique of, whatever. They're anti-Semites. They don't know what they're doing. They've never been. They're not experts. But it would be great if they were pressured to contend with reality, as Smith brought up while talking to Tucker Carlson.
Anybody can read for themselves the clean break memo. It was written by Richard Pearl and David Wormser to Benjamin Netanyahu that was like, look, here is our plan. And the break was from the peace process. The break was from Oslo. And they go, look, here's the plan. You know how Yitzhak Rabin and all these liberal Jews are saying we have to make peace with the Palestinians so that we can then make peace with the broader Arab world? Well, no, we got a new plan. We're gonna break with all of that. We're not doing this land swap thing. We're not giving the Palestinians a state. What we'll do is we'll have America overthrow all of these other governments. That way you never have to make peace with the Palestinians and you can just enjoy domination over the region. But all these years later, you either have to apologize for your role in this catastrophe or defend your role in this catastrophe and talk about how you still really believe it was the right thing to do. But you can't sit here and say, you're not an expert and you're a Jew hater if you say the word neoconservative.
Smith is right. And the substance of what he's saying should be addressed. I mean, Iraq, Syria, Libya, the list goes on. Also, what I would love to know is whether Murray or Levin think Trump is some sort of anti-Semite, given the statements he himself made during his speech in Saudi Arabia just yesterday.
It's crucial for the wider world to note this great transformation has not come from Western interventionists or flying people in beautiful planes giving you lectures on how to live and how to govern your own affairs. No, the gleaming marvels of Riyadh and Abu Dhabi were not created by the so-called nation builders, neocons, or liberal nonprofits like those who spent trillions and trillions of dollars failing to develop Kabul, Baghdad, so many other cities. Instead, the birth of a modern Middle East has been brought by the people of the region themselves, the people that are right here, the people that have lived here all their lives, developing your own sovereign countries, pursuing your own unique visions and charting your own destinies in your own way. It's really incredible what you've done. In the end, the so-called nation builders wrecked far more nations than they built, and the interventionists were intervening in complex societies that they did not even understand themselves. They told you how to do it, but they had no idea how to do it themselves. Peace, prosperity, and progress ultimately came not from a radical rejection of your heritage, but rather from embracing your national traditions and embracing that same heritage that you love so dearly.
Now look, I'm not a sucker. I know that Donald Trump forms his opinions and his policy based on who bribed him last, and Qatar and Saudi Arabia are working overtime at the moment. And you add the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu is an unsavory, unlikable piece of crap, you can kind of understand why Trump is kind of changing his tune in regard to foreign policy in the Middle East. Now finally, Tucker Carlson himself used to be a raging neoconservative. And guess what? Now he surprisingly expresses a great deal of remorse that used to be the case.
I mean, I spent my whole life in cable news. It, obviously is in terminal decline. I had all kinds of views that I argued for passionately that were totally wrong. I admitted it. I gained perspective and humility in admitting it. It's the only act of liberation that's really possible in this life, is freeing yourself from like the lies. And the number one lie is I'm God.
Yeah.
And like I'm omniscient or was perfectly wise person, whatever. It's like, you make mistakes. You're a ridiculous primate.
We are ridiculous primates, some more ridiculous than others. But credit where credit is due. Not many people change their worldview based on new information. They usually just attack the messenger instead. Smith, Tucker, and anyone else on the right side of the political aisle who loathes neocons are right to do so, and they deserve credit for it. Hopefully, the Democratic Party wisens up, ditches the Cheneys, and realizes that no one likes a neocon, other than Israel and its allies.
So a schmuck picks a fight with me. Doesn't call me. He's got this sidekick, sort of I don't even know who this guy Smith is. Now, he's free to do what he wants. I believe in free speech. Go ahead, buy a subscription. Do whatever you want. It's perfectly fine by me. But don't screw with me, you little bastard.
Ooh, intimidating. That was conservative talk show host Mark Levin, who did not take kindly to the fact that Tucker Carlson and libertarian comedian Dave Smith called him out after Levin had tweeted that neocon is a pejorative for Jew. Now, Levin is a neoconservative. It has nothing to do with being Jewish. It has everything to do with being pro-war, especially in the Middle East. And Republicans, voters specifically, don't really favor the neocons these days. They don't like the neocons. In fact, most Americans don't like neocons. So Levin would really like to be, rebranded. He'd like to kind of run away from the neocon moniker, but make no mistake about it, he is a neocon. So he didn't like that he was being criticized by Carlson and Smith, and so he decided to respond to them. You're about to hear it, but just a quick note. You're gonna hear him refer to Tucker Carlson as Chatsworth Osborne Jr., which apparently was a nickname that Rush Limbaugh had given Tucker Carlson. Are you familiar with this, Cenk?
I am not. That sounds fun, but I've never heard it before.
Yeah, me either. I don't know why that's the nickname. I don't really care, but I wanted to let you know that so you know who he's referring to in this clip. Watch.
You see, all the neocons are gone. So why do they keep using the word neoconservative? Notice they don't use hawk, interventionist, neocon. Why do they keep saying neocon? Because many of the neoconservatives were old-time left-wing Democrat Jews. Chatsworth knows it. I know it. And many of the people that use that phrase either don't know what they're talking about, but in the magazines and on the internet, they know it. So they're not going to say the Jews are dragging us into a war. They'll say Israel is, Netanyahu is. They're not going to say the Jews this and the Jews. So they use neocon. Chatsworth is smart enough to know what he's doing.
Oh my God, there's a lot to respond to there. Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, George W. Bush was a neocon, but wasn't a left-winger and also wasn't Jewish. Am I correct?
You are, actually, and I've got more where that came from. But he says, now they're not gonna say Jew or Jewish, they're gonna say Netanyahu or Israel. You know why? Because it's not Jews that are driving us into wars. It's Israel. That's a foreign government, and don't smear Jews in America by pretending that all Jews are doing it. No, most of the Jewish Americans in this country vote Democrat, first of all, and the neocons were all Republicans in the beginning. And so, I mean, Mark Levin has always had, what people don't know about him and Ben Shapiro is that they're actually their original Douglas Murrays. Like, they're always claiming some sort of expertise that they don't actually have. So he's like, oh, I am an intellectual. Are you? Because I've never seen it. You always get your facts wrong all the time. You have this hilarious propaganda that never makes any sense. Here, I'll connect every single story Mark Levin has ever talked about. We should do everything Israel wants. Okay.
That's exactly what that is his foreign policy preference. That's it. That's all it is.
Period.
Yeah.
Period. So he'll find a way to make Greenland about Israel. And by the way, the good news is if we buy Greenland, we could put it on his forehead. There'll still be enough room.
Definitely.
Okay, so anyways, so he's like, yeah, you know, it's the neocons are originally Democratic Jews. Are they really? Is Bernie Sanders a neocon? Bernie Sanders is the exact opposite of a neocon. So you're just making crap up and then pretend that you're an intellectual. And so it's unbearable. And so like, I think Tucker's good on this issue.
He is good on this issue. And by the way, look, I don't want to be scammed by someone on the right who like makes a few anti-war statements because he wants, favorable commentary about his statements, but in reality is pro-war. Like I've seen a little bit of those tricks being played on the right. No, I've listened to enough of Tucker Carlson's podcast to A, understand that he's obsessed with religion, which is scary, but also B, more importantly, he has shed his neoconservatism. He has expressed a lot of remorse on multiple episodes about his past support for neoconservative policies. And for whatever reason, he's evolved on the issue and deserves credit on that.
Yeah, and so again, it's a simple concept. You could disagree with him on everything else, but he's right on this. So I really hated that part where he said they want to say Jew, but they don't say Jew. But one, because it's actually a wonderful thing that they're not saying the Jews are making us do it, because that would be both anti-Semitic and wrong, factually incorrect, right? So they're actually being correct when they say it's the neocons that wanted to attack Iraq and Iran. That is correct. And it's a specific group that is not just Jewish. John Bolton is in the group, he's Christian. Dick Cheney's in the group, he's Christian.
Mike Huckabee.
George Bush, Mike Huckabee. So, and they have different interests. Huckabee cares about Christian Zionism and Jesus coming back and killing us all. So Netanyahu was a neocon, and Netanyahu cared about making America fight Iraq on behalf of Israel. So that is true, but that doesn't mean, not only does that not represent all Jews in America, let alone the world, but it doesn't even represent all of Israel. Israel at the time didn't necessarily want us to attack Iraq, but Netanyahu did. Why? Because he's a neocon.
He is.
It explains an ideology that has nothing to do with religion, and that's why Mark Levin doesn't like it, because it's true. And he doesn't like anything that's true. And he wants to pretend, go back to the one-trick pony. So if you criticize neocons on ideological grounds, he's just gonna call you an anti-Semite. You didn't say Jewish because you didn't mean Jewish, but he'll pretend that you said Jewish so that he can call you an anti-Semite.
Yeah.
It's the oldest trick in the book. Mark, it's super boring and old like you.
And people just don't like people like you anymore. Okay,
They don't.
They've
Nobody likes Mark
wizened
Levin.
up to people like you.
Yeah.
And realize that the things you advocate for are damaging, both to people living in the Middle East, but also to Americans who are forced to go into the Middle East to fight these wars. He's not gonna go in and fight that war. That bloviating hog is not gonna go risk his life or his children's life in fighting a war in Iran on behalf of Israel. But that doesn't stop him from advocating for said war, which you're about to hear in this next clip.
The American people do not want the Islamo-Nazi regime in Iran to get a nuclear weapon. They don't want them to have missile technology where they can put a nuclear warhead on an intercontinental ballistic missile and hit the United States. And the fact that they don't want that doesn't make them a warmonger, a neocon, or anything else. It makes them patriotic Americans. That's number one. Number two, I am hoping, you are hoping that Donald Trump figures out some kind of deal that nobody else has figured out yet, but he's capable of it, to stop them, short of war. But many of us are skeptical. Why? Because we have a brain, because we know the Islamo-Nazi regime in Tehran is a terrorist regime that has violated every piece of paper it's ever signed. That's why we're at the 11th hour. That's why Donald Trump's having to deal with it. We know what terrorism means as much as we know what neocon means. So if you're trying to stop the Iranian regime, which chants day in and day out, death to America, death to America, death to America, and tries to assassinate our president, you're not a warmonger, you're a peacemaker.
Has any evidence been shared that Iran had ordered the assassination of Donald Trump? Because I still haven't seen it.
None, zero.
There were some Biden administration officials who claimed that that was the case. They provided no evidence. And they themselves, by the way, were neoconservatives or believed in neoconservative foreign policy, even though they were serving in a Democratic administration.
He just told on himself. He said something really interesting there. He says, we know what neocon means. We know what terrorism means. So you think that neocon means Jewish, which it doesn't. And then you say, we know what terrorism means. I think he's saying that's what we call Muslims. We just call them terrorists.
Yeah, of course.
He just told on himself,
no,
right?
But Jay, look, this is a really important point. There is terrorism right now, and it's happening to Palestinians in the Gaza Strip by the IDF. So you want to talk about terrorism? Let's talk about terrorism. He wanted to talk about how many children were killed by Hamas on October 7th. Those atrocities were disgusting. Make no mistake about it. But Mark Levin does not care about the tens of thousands of Palestinian children in Gaza that were slaughtered by Israel. Those kids' lives don't matter. He doesn't care about the 2-year-olds that were shot by Israeli snipers in the Gaza Strip. And we know about that according to American doctors who risked their own lives to provide medical care to Palestinian civilians in Gaza. I mean, this guy is, the jig is up. Everyone has caught on to what the reality is. And he's holding on for dear life, hoping that he can like rebrand and try to change the fact that he's fallen out of favor with Republican voters. But he has. No one's interested in you.
Yeah, last two things for me. He's like, I don't know who that Smith guy is. What happened to you're such an intellectual? Why don't you look him up? Super lazy at a minimum. Okay, second of all, Dave Smith is fairly large. He's one of the leading libertarians in the country and probably way more popular than you right now.
He's a big, strong man.
So when you try to diminish him, what you're accidentally doing is diminishing yourself because you're announcing your own ignorance. Okay, so secondly, he says, now you have a brain. See, he's constantly calling himself smart. So Ben Shapiro does the same thing. We're smart, everyone who opposes Israel is dumb. Really? We're the experts, why? Based on what? Because we love Israel, so we're experts. You're not experts on anything other than being really stupid and a propagandist. So he goes, now if you have a brain, you know about the Islamo-Nazis. That's a word you made up, you moron. That's not a thing that even exists.
I know.
So if you have a brain, You know who's not smart? Someone who's constantly calling himself smart. Okay, and the jury's in on Mark Levin. Neocon, loser, and guy who has no credibility on this issue at all. The most biased man in America and constantly declaring his own ignorance. If you have a brain, you don't know what a neocon is. And you don't know who Dave Smith is. And you don't know anything. You see how I have a brain? No, Mark, I don't see it at all.
Idan Alexander, an American citizen who, until recently, most thought was no longer living, thought was dead, is going to be released in about 2 hours, actually. And he's going to be released before the eyes of Steve Witkoff, who has done a fantastic job.
As you just heard, President Donald Trump announced today that a dual American citizen who also unfortunately was a hostage of Hamas has been released by Hamas. The individual freed is Eden Alexander, the last known American hostage in Gaza. And it's important to understand just how Alexander was released, how this deal was made through the United States and Hamas. So per ABC News, Hamas announced its intention to free Alexander on Sunday, describing the decision as a part of the steps being taken to achieve a ceasefire. The statement said Hamas had been in contact with American officials over the past few days as part of ceasefire negotiations. And that account was backed up by an anonymous source from the United States. This US official familiar with the deal to release Alexander told ABC News that the agreement came together in recent days via direct talks between the US and Hamas. In other words, Israel was not part of this hostage release negotiation. They were not part of this deal. We're gonna revisit that in just a minute. But Trump announced this on Truth Social as well, writing the following: "I'm grateful to all those involved in making this monumental news happen. This was a step taken in good faith towards the United States and the efforts of the mediators, Qatar and Egypt, to put an end to this very brutal war and return all living hostages and remains to their loved ones. Hopefully this is the first of those final steps necessary to end this brutal conflict. I look very much forward to the day of that day of celebration." I mean, he mentions ending the war several times, and it's clear that that is what the president wants, and that is good news. How that ends up manifesting, we'll see. But the Trump administration isn't just bypassing Israel, they're even calling Israel out for negotiating in bad faith and serving as an obstacle to ending the war. According to Channel 12, here's what Steve Witkoff, who is the Trump administration's special envoy to the Middle East, told hostage families in Israel, quote, "We want to bring the hostages home, but Israel is not willing to end the war. Israel is prolonging it despite the fact that we don't see where else we can go and that an agreement must be reached." So you can kind of understand why the Israelis hate Witkoff, want to get rid of Witkoff, but make no mistake about it, Witkoff is the first American official who's willing to call a spade and call out Israel for serving as an obstacle to a peace deal.
Yeah, so first off, I'm gonna give a lot of credit here to Donald Trump. And if you're on the left and you're like, oh, he brought home a hostage and cut out Israel, but he's Trump, boo, I don't wanna give him credit. What do you need? What do you like? So did you not wanna bring home a hostage? Did you wanna make sure he followed the orders of the Israeli government? I don't know what you want, but I'm a fair person and an honest person. Trump deserves a lot of credit for this deal, okay? So now bringing the brother home already is great news, but that also proves a second thing, which is look at how easy it was. Like all he had to do was remove Israel from the negotiations, talk to Hamas, and you know what Hamas got in return? Nothing, just a promise that, hey, you know what? We'll keep this in mind, it'll create some goodwill. Yeah. Super easy, okay? Why are we not getting the deal done? Well, listen to Witkoff. Witkoff is telling you it's because the Israelis don't want peace. They want continual war. Why? Because they want to occupy the Gaza Strip and steal that land.
Right. And look, Witkoff, I just want to note, hasn't lost all hope that there could be a ceasefire deal, although he's kind of going into this with eyes wide open, like he can see what the dynamic is with Israel involved. He says to the hostage families, there's currently an opportunity window that we hope Israel and all the mediators will take advantage of. We are putting pressure on all the mediators and doing everything we can to bring the hostages home. So he still has a little bit of hope, but I can't believe I'm saying this. Someone who Donald Trump tapped to serve as his special envoy to the Middle East, Donald Trump tapped him, is way better on this issue than who Biden had involved in peace negotiations and a ceasefire deal. It's just incredible to see it.
Yeah, so look, redemption on every count. So we told you this isn't about Jews, this is about foreign governments. Witkoff is a Jewish American, and he's saying the right thing, doing the right thing, representing America, and I appreciate it, and doing it way better than Anthony Blinken did. And so it has nothing to do with religion. It has with two different governments. One's on the wrong track, and we need to stop enabling them. We need to help our ally get back to reality and decency and morality. And I'm sure that Witkoff agrees, and that's why he's saying things that are true. Now that leads to the second thing. So what did we tell you? We told you that the Democrats are a bunch of robots and they're never going to waver 1 inch from what the donor class wants, okay? Trump is a wild card, and that wild card could go disastrously, as when he was talking about how we would have ground troops in Gaza and then build a Trump Riviera, absolute disaster. Talking about maybe the occupation of Gaza and the West Bank, etc. But a wild card could also has some chance of going in the right direction. So it took a wild card to have an envoy who will say, well, the Israelis don't want peace. Oh, truth broke out.
I know, it's incredible.
So let's be honest, a Democratic envoy would have never said that.
Not in a million
years. They
years.
would not have had permission to say that. Joe Biden's envoys obviously never said that. They would lie on Israel's behalf every time. They say, oh, we really want to get to a ceasefire, but it's of course all Hamas's fault. The son of a bitch, Hamas terrorists. Israel's great and wonderful, and there's nothing they could do about it. Oh my, Israel, right? So that was Blinken and all the Jake Sullivan and all the loser robots in the Biden administration. And Kamala promised to do the exact same thing. So if you're a Democrat, please wakey. Right?
They won't.
And they won't. Oh no, I bet she would have miraculously turned around 180 degrees and done the right thing. No, she promised that she would never do the right thing. And so we're not like blind about Trump. You crazy, naive? No, it could get way worse, right? But since he's not a robot, sometimes truth accidentally breaks out.
Trump doesn't abide by any of the rules associated with traditional political parties in this country, right? So this isn't a Republican versus Democrat thing. This is a Trump versus typical status quo politician thing. Because make no mistake about it, had Trump been any other traditional conservative Republican, we would not be having a conversation about his special envoy admitting that Israel is the one serving as an obstacle to a ceasefire. And so, look, there are some interesting developments right now because of the fact that Trump is kind of soured on his relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu and vice versa. And so that might be changing the dynamic of US foreign policy as it pertains to Israel moving forward, but specifically during the Trump administration. I think any other administration that comes after Trump is gonna revert right back to giving Israel everything it wants. So here's what I mean. So look, Netanyahu has been pushing the United States to bomb Iran, to get engaged in a hot war with Iran on behalf of Israel. To Donald Trump's credit, he has resisted those calls. He does not want to go to war with Iran. In fact, what he'd like to do is enter a new nuclear deal with Iran to prevent them from building nuclear weapons. And I am 100% supportive of Trump's thinking on that. Now, the US also ended its strikes against the Houthis, or as Trump likes to say, the Houthis, who were very brave, as he also said. Netanyahu didn't like that. And again, Trump wants to engage in these negotiations with Iran. Netanyahu hates that. So here's what NBC News reported on Sunday. Netanyahu was particularly upset when Trump said that he had yet to decide whether Iran would be allowed to enrich uranium under a new nuclear deal his administration is negotiating. For his part, Trump has been frustrated with Netanyahu's decision to begin a new military offensive in Gaza, which the president sees as at odds with his plan for rebuilding there. And according to Ilan Goldenberg, who worked on Middle East policy during the Obama and Biden administrations, Netanyahu cannot publicly criticize Trump too harshly or really much at all because apparently Israelis love Trump, including right-wing Israelis. So Netanyahu's whole political strategy and survival strategy is based on holding his coalition and holding his political base together, Goldenberg said. And those folks love Trump. So for him to go very publicly against Trump is something he really can't do. So this dynamic is just really interesting, and I hope it keeps going in this direction, because maybe for the first time, I don't want to say that there could be a decoupling of this relationship between the United States and Israel, but frostier relations might actually bode well for the lives of innocent people who are currently trapped in Gaza.
Yeah, so let's break down all the ways that the decoupling is happening. It doesn't mean that it can't be reversed. It could be reversed at any second, and Trump is super fickle and he could go in a disastrous direction at any second. Having said that, for now, let's look at the facts without the emotions and the tribalism involved, okay? So did he attack Iran when Netanyahu told him to? No, he didn't. It's a huge story from the New York Times, and there's no question that Netanyahu wanted that attack. And my guess is he ordered it like he normally does, right? I order the American president to attack Iran on my behalf. And Trump was like, no. I haven't seen that in my lifetime. So, okay, to be fair, you could say, well, Biden didn't attack Iran either, and Obama made a great deal with Iran. So, and especially Obama. Obama did defy Netanyahu. Netanyahu did not want that deal, and he got us a great deal anyway. Okay, so that's all right, not bad. Give credit where credit is due, but yeah, Obama and others have done something a little similar, okay? And Obama's deal was better. So, and I don't say that because I'm a Democrat, because look, I'm even talking to Republicans now going, Marjorie Taylor Greene on this show was like, the Obama deal was actually pretty good. I mean, I never thought I'd see anything like that, right? So now, okay, the second thing. He did the deal with the Houthis and he cut Israel out of it. So, and Israel was super mad about it. He said, you're gonna stop bombing American ships and we're gonna stop bombing Yemen. And the Houthis were like, yeah, deal, let's go, right? It didn't say anything about stopping the bombing of Israeli ships or ships headed to Israel. So Israel's like, how dare you? You did a peace deal for Americans and you did not consider Israel first? And Trump's like, yeah, that's right, that's what I did. And then the third thing is the hostage deal. Israel doesn't want the hostages released. Why? Well, first of all, all right, envoy, our envoy is telling you that, right? Basically. But the reason they don't want them released is because it's a pretext for, we had to bomb Gaza more. We had to keep taking more and more of Gaza's land. In fact, all of it. We had to drive out all the Palestinians into the desert and starve them to death because of the hostages. We were defending ourselves from a war that started, I don't know, 28 years ago or whatever, whenever it started. We are still doing self-defense as we took the Sudetenland, I mean Gaza, okay? So, and Trump is like, but there's an American hostage there. Israel's like, no, shut up, don't worry about the American hostage. We need him as a pawn. Trump's like, I don't think so. Hey, Hamas, you wanna make a deal? You give me the hostage, I give you nothing. And Hamas is like, yeah, okay, deal. If you can't say that that was good from Trump, then you really do have TDS, okay? So that was great, and the decoupling is real. It doesn't mean it'll hold, but if we fully decouple and go, Israel, so there's somebody doing this the other day and I loved it. Love you, see ya, bye-bye, okay? Hey, listen, you're a grown-up country, one of the top 20 economies, enjoy, okay? Right. But we don't have to give you endless money. Nobody ever said that. We don't have to kiss your ass. We don't have to do our entire foreign policy based on you. By the way, is Trump doing it out of good reasons or because he's getting a lot of business deals from Qatar, UAE, and Saudi Arabia? I don't know, but I don't care too much either because we got to end that genocide.
100%. And look, we live in a corrupt political system where even foreign governments have sway over our politicians and the presidential administration. If bribery from other players helps balance things out in regard to this war, I will allow it.
The conditions in Gaza is getting more catastrophic than before. We are now seeing children are starving.
אני כן יריב עזתים, כן וכן, זה החובה שלנו. החובה שלנו להגלות את העזתים.
אתה חבר כנסת בפרלמנט הישראלי אומר, אני כן מעוניין להריב עזתים, אז אם אתה מבין את ההשלכות של האמירה הזאת.
אני מסביר לך, הן פשוטות. אני מעוניין להריב את העזתים, לעשות מצור על מלא מלא.
That man that you just heard say that Gazans need to be starved is actually an Israeli Knesset member by the name of Moshe Sada, admitting again on Israeli television that starvation isn't just, a side effect of this war on Gaza. It's part of the goal, it's part of the Israeli government and the IDF's strategy. And sadly, he is far from the only member of the Israeli parliament who sees starvation as a tool for punishing and driving civilians out of Gaza, which of course is considered a war crime. It violates international laws. Now, the Israeli blockade of Gaza is now in its third month, and I mean blockade of humanitarian aid entering the Gaza Strip. This began in early March. No food, water, or medication has been allowed into the territory, Cenk.
Yeah, so that guy you just saw is a bona fide fascist, and he is very similar to the Nazis. So I hope I'm being clear enough with what some members of the Israeli government are up to. And don't tell me that you're offended by that if you support a guy who says, let's starve children to death. That is Nazi 101. So, and if you say, no, it's okay because they're not Israeli children, so we can starve them to death, their lives don't count. That's Nazi 101, okay? So, and I wish he was alone, and I wish he was a lone madman in the Israeli government, and we could give you the context and say, no, don't worry, it's not like the Israeli government actually voted to do that policy. But we can't tell you that because the Israeli government did vote to do that policy. And there are tons of voices, as Anna's about to explain to you, inside the Israeli government, literally saying, yeah, of course we should starve their children to death. And in fact, and this is the most amazing part of the story, they think that it is immoral not to starve the children.
Yeah, do you remember in the beginning of the current war on Gaza, there was that big debate about whether the IDF had bombed a hospital?
And they're like, oh my God.
We would never do that.
The IDF is a moral army. We would never bomb a hospital. Every hospital in Gaza is obliterated. And now they are actively saying out loud in public and in internal debates about how they would like to murder Palestinian children.
With our money.
Yeah, and of course they won't ever do it with their own money. They need our money to not give the Palestinians food. Okay, so now if you're still defending this particular Israeli government, you really, really need to go and clarify your morality because you don't have any.
Yep.
Okay,
I totally
there is
agree.
no excuse for this at all, at all. But again, the bias is so deep that those Knesset members and cabinet members, they really believe that it's immoral not to murder these people.
I mean, it is a case study in dehumanization because they have so effectively dehumanized Palestinians, including literal babies, literal children, that they loudly and proudly declare that they are intentionally starving them to death. So let's get to those details. Let's get to all the different Knesset members who have weighed in on this. Now, Haaretz has reported that last week the Knesset held a first of its kind discussion on the humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip. But I want to be clear. They weren't holding this hearing in order to do something to help Palestinians who are suffering as a result of this humanitarian crisis. They're more worried about the public relations fallout from what the Israeli government and the IDF is doing. They're worried about the PR. So that's why they're holding this hearing. Now, during the meeting, Dr. Sharon Shaul, who is from Natan, an Israeli-based organization that provides humanitarian aid around the world, remarked, quote, I think that even everyone sitting around this table doesn't want a suffering child to be unable to receive painkillers or minimal medical treatment. And to her surprise, That actually ended up setting off a firestorm during this hearing. Her assumption that nobody wanted Gazan children to starve apparently was incorrect. So Israeli lawmaker Amit Halevi from Netanyahu's Likud party angrily interrupted her to say this, quote, "I'm not sure you're speaking for us when you say we want to treat every child and every woman. I hope you don't stand behind that statement either. When fighting a group like this, the distinctions that exist in a normal world don't exist."
No, Amit, they do exist. It's just that you're a monster.
Yep.
And you'd like to be like the Nazis and murder children. That moral distinction exists for the rest of us who are not Nazis like you, okay?
And so Saul.
So look, hold on one second. I want to be clear. Dr. Sharon Shaw is the head of the medical sector at Natan Worldwide Disaster Relief, and she's a wonderful person. She's an Israeli, and she's saying, can we please get them medical attention? Because I would hope none of us would be for children starving to death or not being able to deal with pain, and Anna's got more details in a second for you. So good person. The rest of them attack her. They're like, how dare you? It is immoral to not want to cause these children pain. Okay, well, monsters defined. There is no excuse for it at all. And if you're trying to make excuses for it, okay, and now we know what you would have done in the 1930s.
Yeah, look, Amit's thinking is barbaric thinking, okay? It's the way a barbarian would think. And so in the beginning of this war, when Netanyahu tried to frame this situation as a war between civilization and, barbarians, really, you're gonna claim that you guys are the ones representing civilization, fighting against, barbaric actions? And what Hamas did on October 7th, to be sure, was barbaric. But what does it say of the Israeli government when their response is 1,000 times more barbaric?
Yeah.
Killed far more civilians than Hamas did on October 7th.
Imagine if Hamas said, well, of course we should starve all Israeli children to death. They were occupying us, they deserved it, and they were hiding behind the human shields of Israeli babies, so we starved them all to death. We would all rightfully say they are the worst monsters in the world.
Right.
Now, Israeli government officials are saying it and saying it's immoral if you don't starve them. So let's give you the horrific details of what these Nazis said.
So Shaw responded to that statement by saying, I hope that you too don't want a 4-year-old whose arm has been amputated to go without painkillers. I hope you have that empathy too. Then lawmaker Lamor Son Har Malik decided to jump in. This individual is from the Religious Zionism Party, and they say that the only treatment needed here is for you.
Okay. So now threatening your own, threatening Israelis. Oh, you dare to be a decent person, Dr. Sharon Shaw?
You need treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something wrong with you. Another participant remarked, my God, this is so sick. You are the sickest doctor I've ever seen.
Well, how many Nazi doctors do you know? Do you know Dr. Mengele and his descendants or something? And I mean, do all the doctors you know think that you should starve children to death? Jesus, what kind of Nazi doctor hospital are you familiar with? Because guys, Haaretz is reporting this. It's an Israeli paper. There's plenty of perfectly good things in Israel. Their freedom of press within Israel's fine. They murder all the journalists in Gaza. That's a different situation, right? There's good people like Dr. Sharon Shaw. Sometimes their courts do the right thing, sometimes, etc. So, but what we're seeing is something shocking that we have never seen before, where government officials in an allied country, a country we fund, are actively saying we should murder children, and if you're a doctor and you don't support us inflicting pain on children, starving children, and murdering children, you're not a good doctor.
Sadly, it didn't end there. Now, someone who was there at the time of this hearing by the name of Yazar Lifshitz, whose son was an Israeli man who was kidnapped and murdered by Hamas. You can look. I find the quote that I'm about to read, absolutely deplorable. But I also understand that when Hamas kills a family member of yours, you're going to want to retaliate and retaliate in incredibly cruel, unfair ways toward people who didn't even do anything wrong, right? And so with that in mind, this is what Lifshitz said. Although there are almost no innocents in Gaza, any moral person can understand that starving children is not something we can be proud of. This is a person whose own family member was killed by Hamas and is able to see things way more clearly than the scum in the current Israeli parliament. And I mean it when I say scum. Not all of them, but the ones who are openly saying that they're in favor of starving defenseless children to death, they're scum. They're scum, and we're funding them.
Is this going to be a point of contention in America now? Do we have to debate this on cable news? Well, if I say, hey, maybe you shouldn't starve the Palestinian children to death, will I be called an anti-Semite? And the answer, you know what the answer is. Yeah, they will debate it. And yes, we will be called anti-Semitic. They'll say, blood libel, blood libel. You're saying that the Jews, because it's a Jewish state, are murdering children. No, I'm not saying it. Their government officials are saying it. And they're saying that if you don't murder children, you're immoral. I've never seen anything like it. And I can't, I've said it a million times, I'll say it another million. It's not all Israelis. You see the other Israelis, and I agree with Anna, if Hamas killed your son, you get to be super enraged by it, and I don't call you any of those names because you're in a different category. You're understandably super upset about something terrible that happened to you, right? Yeah. The others seem to relish killing these children. And it's not because they're Jewish or Israel's a Jewish state, because power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. We in the United States have enabled this by saying every time Israel did a massive war crime as something despicable, we said, thank you very much, here's a new blank check, murder as many people as you like, just absolutely oppress the Palestinians and treat them like they're non-humans and kill as many of their children as you can. Thank you, sir, here's another blank check. That's how the American government caused this catastrophe. And Israel wouldn't be in this shape, and their government officials wouldn't be this monstrous if we didn't continue to give them a blank check after every terrible thing that they have ever done.
Let me read you the rest of his comment. He says, there's a line we need to make sure we don't cross. Seeing mothers with dead children in their arms, is that what will bring back our hostages? Our strength also lies in the justice of our path. I just want to say Lifshitz is absolutely right, and I commend Lifshitz for having this view. This is the humane view, okay? But unfortunately, there are so many members of the current Israeli parliament who don't agree with him. So Har Malik, the lawmaker from the religious Zionism party, scolded him in response, though, saying, it's terrible that you even bring that up. It's terrible, awful, and horrific that you're talking about starvation when our children were butchered so cruelly. What do you think is happening to the Palestinian children? The Palestinian children aren't being butchered right now by your government, by your military. That's exactly what's happening right now as we speak. And on top of that, as they're being butchered, as innocent civilians are being butchered, the Israeli government is blocking humanitarian aid to ensure that either they die suffering in unbearable, unspeakable pain, or that they die without any chance of keeping them alive, helping them survive through medical intervention. It's disgusting, and they think they're the moral ones. Yeah. That's the amazing part about all of this.
Yeah, and he's yelling at again, the family member of someone who was killed by Hamas, as if they don't have. And I don't agree with everything that Lifshitz said. I don't agree that there's no innocence in Gaza, but I get that they are upset about the situation. But even so, they say, well, what are we gonna do? Be the monsters that we think we're fighting? And the cabinet members go, absolutely. We should be those monsters. We should be way worse than their monsters. They killed 36 of our children, and we've only killed about 20,000 of theirs. Why, we should starve them all to death, all the little babies. You see how they're the monsters? No, brother, I see how you're a monster. So I see how both sides, by the way, 36 kids, terrible. We've said it a billion times, terrible, right? If you think 36 kids dying by Hamas is terrible, but you don't think 15 to 20,000 children already dead, let alone the starvation that's happening now, if you don't think that's terrible, you're basically saying, I'm a racist, bigot, fascist, and in this case, you have earned that title. and you say, oh yeah, my babies are relevant, your babies are trash, and I plan on murdering them. That's exactly what a Nazi would say.
So there is a rabbi who's been vocal in pushing back against this idea that it's totally fine to starve civilian children to death. And his name is Rick Jacobs. He penned an op-ed for the Washington Post titled, "I'm a Rabbi, Starving Gaza is Immoral." And so he called Israel's assault on Gaza a just war, but condemned the blockade of food and humanitarian aid into the region, saying that starving Gazan civilians neither will bring Israel the total victory over Hamas it seeks, nor can be justified by Jewish values or humanitarian law. Will this policy bring home the 59 remaining hostages, including the 24 who are still alive? It's unlikely, and contrary to the wishes of almost 70% of Israelis who, in a recent poll, prioritized the hostages' return over that elusive total victory. Further, he writes that Hamas is willing to sacrifice thousands of Palestinians by hoarding humanitarian aid. Israel must not. Depriving Gazans of food and water will not make Israel safer or hasten the return of the hostages. Each of us who loves Israel must say so and urge Israel to change this policy. So I wouldn't be surprised if this rabbi is currently being attacked by members of the Israeli parliament.
Okay, I want to be clear about who he is. He's not just a regular old rabbi. He's the president of the Union for Reform Judaism, which is the largest denomination for Jewish Americans. So he is representing Jewish Americans more than probably anyone is, because that's the largest denomination. And he's saying, enough, don't. So yeah, I don't agree with him that it's a just war, but of course he's gonna say that, right? And so you wanna have nuance about your positions on Israel, God bless, man. I'll take nuance, I'll take disagreements around the edges, maybe even some core issues, right? But if you cross the Rubicon and you say, yeah, let's starve their children to death, there's no discussion with a Nazi. And so, like, that's because that's literal, Let's murder their children is not a thing that you can compromise. Let's compromise, murder half the children? No, but Rick Jacobs is not doing that. Rick Jacobs is doing something really moral, outstanding, and absolutely necessary. He's basically saying, without saying the words, not in our name. And thank you, Rabbi Jacobs, for saying that. I appreciate it, we all appreciate it. Everyone should rally around Rabbi Jacobs, okay? And say enough, because you're driving up anti-Semitism through the roof, okay? And don't tell me, oh, they hated us anyway. No, you fill in the blank, Turks, Poles, Jamaicans, it doesn't matter. If the whole world sees that group starving children to death, they're all gonna hate you. Why? Because of what you're doing.
Right.
Wake up, listen to Rabbi Jacobs, please wake up. Because if we here in America, especially, rabbis, et cetera, moral leaders, don't come forward and say, this is wrong, and we need to stop enabling Israel, then we're never going to stop this. If you keep sending the checks, they're gonna think, oh, we did a great job. America thinks we did a wonderful job. It just sent us a $20 billion gift for our war crimes. It sent us an $8 billion gift, a $4 billion gift. America won't stop giving us gifts for this genocide and ethnic cleansing. Let's do more of it. That's the message we're sending here in America. And we all have to unite to make sure we do not send that message, not in our name. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.